What does a news anchor, a chaplain, a salesperson, and a negotiator all have in common? Well, those are all careers held by our guest on today's episode. On this episode, we're going to highlight how effective communication can help in all aspects of your life, focusing on three main concepts: the soft skills advantage, asking the right question, and how building a better culture can help you with better outcomes. Stay tuned and listen from our guest, Heather DeSiena. This is the Truth Be Told podcast, where we unlock the secrets of strategic communication. Our guest today is Heather DeSiena, a dynamic speaker and an engaging educator, making her a trusted voice in leadership, team development, and communication strategies. Audiences leave her sessions empowered and motivated to approach their most important conversations with clarity, courage, and intention. In her own words, some people build careers on numbers. I build mine on words, knowing when to speak, what to say, and how to make it count. Her approach has led to her success as a news anchor, a chaplain, cybersecurity seller, negotiator, professional speaker, and now our special guest on this episode of Truth Be Told. Welcome to this episode of Truth Be Told. I am your host, Dave Thompson. I'm here with my friend, Heather DeSiena, joining me live. And before I even ask you anything about anything, I didn't set you up for this one yet.
Okay.
But you got this tagline all over the place, and I love this. It said, "Words matter in every industry. Success isn't built on silence." What does that mean?
We have to choose our words so carefully because it really does impact everything that we're doing. Every industry, I've encountered several of them at this point in my own life and career. Every conversation, I think that we just don't consciously think through what we're saying often enough, right? And success doesn't happen in silence. I've lived that. I teach that. I think there's a way to be bold and speak what you need to speak, but do so in a tactful and effective way. So you did throw that one at me. What a way to start, but that's the essence of it.
Yeah, that wasn't fair, right? I set you up a little bit, but I think it's really important
start.
because guests just learned a little bit about you in the intro, but we'll learn a lot more about your career experience. But to me, what's impressive is how much just like communication, words have mattered in everything that you've done in your career space.
Yeah.
Especially your very first, well, I don't know if it was your first job, but there's a job that popped up in one of your reels as one of the oddest jobs you ever received a paycheck for. Are we allowed to talk about it?
You know what? Let's talk about it.
It
was in college. It was, well, I won't age myself. It was in college, and I was a bartender at a rough and tough cowboy bar. And you'd better believe, Dave, that my words mattered even there. Now, they might have been, shouting words across the bar top, but similar skill sets, which I'm sure we're going to talk about today. I had to quickly build rapport with these cowboys coming in from the rodeo, had to build a quick relationship, get their orders, get them accurately, get it done, and keep them coming back. And that's how I got tips, and that was one of my first jobs. You're right. Even there, the way I presented, the words I used, how I used that that mattered so much.
Yeah, I love that because like in today's world, Heather's doing a little bit of everything, right? You're out there, you can do keynote speeches and you can do corporate consulting with people.
Yeah.
If you haven't picked up yet on her voice, yes, she was a news anchor for a little
while. I
was
a news anchor.
So to me, it's just really fascinating. We got a lot of people that listen that are always looking at how do I translate my skill set into my next career or into my personal life or whatever. And you've kind of been the master at that, I feel like, and really found value in something that's core to what makes you successful. What do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. I take that as a compliment. It's been such a wild ride. And I think that for your listeners, especially any who are trying to transition into other careers, it is so possible for you, right? I've lived that. I teach that. That is part of what I continue to do through these workshops and through my now fourth career that I'm building. Let me take a step back to explain a little bit more some of those skills and what has translated. You're absolutely right. I started as a bartender, but very quickly graduated and moved into a role as a news anchor. It was my dream at the time. And I mean, very obviously, the way I communicated on TV every night with the public was important, but also I was out in the field doing interviews. And so the way that I was interviewing, the questions I was asking mattered so much and helped make me successful in that role. I then lived that dream, reached those goals. I was interested in other things. I moved into ministry. I have a master's degree in theology, which surprises a lot of people. I studied world religions. I was interested in chaplaincy. When you're working as a chaplain, in fact, some of your law enforcement audience will understand this. You are often sitting with people in their worst moments. If you don't know how to break through, quickly build some rapport, communicate well, it could be a very damaging and disastrous situation. From there, I moved into cybersecurity and I was on the corporate side. I learned how to negotiate seven-figure deals. I interacted with everyone from software developers and engineers to the highest executive boardrooms you can imagine. Learning to use my words well, ask really great questions, and translate things from the top to the bottom and everywhere in between was critical to my success as a seller and a sales leader and a negotiator. I now am starting my fourth career. For the last year and a half, I've been really working on getting into the public speaking circuit. I'm running corporate workshops. And a lot of what I continue to discuss with my clients is, hey, there are some soft skills, hard skills, really a combination of skills that are absolutely transferable, right? And if you want to make a change, go for it. It's not that you don't know what you want to do, it's that you're taking opportunities. Figure out where your skills lie. Mine are obviously communication, using my words, things that we've already started talking about, but hone in on those and figure out how to translate them. So that's where I can come in with some specific help, but that's a lot of the conversation I have today. And yeah, I use my own life and career as a living example of that.
Yeah, I love how it's been a common thread for everything that you've done. Really, it's
Absolutely.
like it's
Yes.
not only what are you good at or you enjoy, it's like what are you passionate about, and then
Yeah.
you can find how to apply it in all these different spaces.
Yeah.
Do you think people, and obviously you're coaching and teaching on this, but do you think people can get better at communication or emotional intelligence regardless of how long they've been in a industry or how long they're stuck in old ways?
1,000% yes. These are skills that we can always be growing. Let me give you a really quick example. This is something tactical, quick. You can implement this today. I don't care if you're law enforcement, I don't care if you're a corporate negotiator, I don't care if you're a news anchor. Let's talk about prescribed language and speech patterns. So a really popular one, at least for us here in the US, is, "Hey Dave, how are you?"
I'm fine. You?
"I'm good, thanks." Okay.
Done.
Yes, done. We're all, and that's a very, even subconscious speech pattern that we're very used to. All right, here is the quick change that you can implement today. Instead of "how are you," I want you to start asking, "how is blank?" "Dave, how is the podcast going? Have you had good guests?"
Oh my God, let me tell
"Dave,"
you all about it.
there we go. We just got a
Right.
level deeper. "Dave, how is your health? I know that you were sick recently. Are things good?" "Dave, how is business? How is life at home? How's it?" Can be anything. But by changing from "how are you" to "how is that," we're building rapport. We're changing our communication style to, I think, be more genuine, which is something important that we might want to talk about. But you're automatically taking the conversation a layer deeper and you're going to open up more responses. That's going to lead to more questions. And before you know it, boom, you're connecting with somebody. So that's like a really fun, quick one that I like to use as an example. Yeah, you can improve your communication skills. Yeah, you can ask better questions. You can do it today. Here are some tips and tricks. Here's how we do it. And that, yeah, that's a lot of what I talk about now.
That's perfect. And it's simple, but it takes some intentionality, right, to the change. I'm thinking about
Because
networking things.
how often do you think about that?
Right.
Or how often do you go into a situation and ask, "Hey, how are you?" Here, one more example, because this is just so important. I think I started honing in on this certainly as a news anchor interviewing people, but imagine working as a chaplain and you show up to a car accident and it's fatal and someone's just been informed that they lost their spouse. Can you imagine me walking in asking, "Hey, how are you? How are you doing?" Obviously, that's not the right question to ask. So, while that's a more serious example, that's really where I started consciously thinking through, okay, how much do we subconsciously just spit things out that probably aren't quite the right things to say or the right things to ask, and how can we improve upon that?
Yeah, I good example, and I love that. And I was thinking about networking events
Yes.
because, or anything. And when I say networking, it can be you go to a wedding where you don't know anybody, right? Like
Right.
interacting with people. But the amount of how are you, fine you, and then you walk past somebody
Yeah, and
and
that's
they
it.
really don't care. I mean, I hope they're fine, but I think that's if you want to build a better relationship with somebody or be memorable, those are the kind of
Yeah.
ways you can start it. And it kind of takes me into you've got three different like main categories. I know you can speak to a million different things, but to simplify it, that I want to cover as we go through this
Yeah.
conversation. And let me just make sure I got them right. Soft skills advantage, which is going to be exactly what we just talked about. So
Yes.
I'm going to get back to that in a second. Ask the question. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Don't be afraid to just ask. And
Right.
you and I've talked about that before.
Yep.
And then having a better culture in a corporate world or any role.
Yeah.
So, but the soft skills piece from what you just said, that to me is the difference between like Chat GPT asking how are you and a person asking how are you. Like there's
Yeah.
intentionality and you care a little bit more.
Intentionality, and let's be honest, regardless of where the world's heading with AI, and being in the cybersecurity world for the last 12 years, I believe things are shifting. Human touch, human connection, it's always going to matter because that is how we're wired. We need to connect with other humans in a variety of ways. And so those are not skills to skimp on. Those are the skills to focus on when you're making career shifts. Networking is a great example. Networking is a soft skill that you can and should improve upon, especially if you're making changes in your life. Doesn't matter what industry. What industry doesn't require great networking to get ahead? So, absolutely, I think just being intentional, like you said, and conscious and aware of how we are being perceived by other humans, how we're trying to connect with other humans, not just to get ahead in life and get something out of it, but to genuinely get to know other people. That's important for all of us and will ultimately lead to more success in our careers. That's never going to go away. That's never not going to be important.
Yeah, and I've seen some of the reels you posted talking about, embracing technology and AI because it's
Yeah,
here, and if you want to be
it's
successful,
here.
don't ignore it.
Jump on board.
Yeah, but there's a difference between what that can provide and what the human element provides. And I'm gonna give you a personal example, and I think this is what when I was listening to some of what you speak about, it kind of connected with me. I have the wonderful pleasure of traveling all the time, which
A lot.
means yeah, I got to deal with airlines and customer service phone
I get
calls.
it. I've been there.
My God. Well, so I was thinking about this kind of lack of empathy, right? So if I had to call an airline and maybe just book a flight or something simple, right? It's a flight a month from now and I can't do the app's not working. I had to call and I get some AI bot.
Sure.
Fine. It's low stress, like low pressure. However, last week I have a canceled flight at like midnight for a flight that's at 6 a.m. So I'm already cranky. They've canceled my flight twice. And now that I have to call the airline, I'm getting this AI bot that is not showing any empathy. It doesn't seem to care about my problem. It's just kind of running through these prompts and I'm just cussing it out at 1 o'clock in the morning on the phone. Where I would much rather have had like a customer service person that's sitting there listening to me go through
Yeah.
these problems. And so I think there was a difference between like low stress, just task oriented technology was there for me. But when I was like pissed off and emotional for my own sleep, lack of thereof, I needed a human connection. And so I
Yep.
think that's what you talk a lot about in these kind of pieces on the soft skills and what differentiates us from technology.
And your advantage is your humanness, right? That is your competitive edge. And you hit the nail on the head, Dave. I think that especially in AI conversations, and this is a bit of a tangent, but again, the cyber nerd in me is kicking in. It's more important that we as people learn to use and prompt AI well. we shouldn't worry so much that it's going to take over everything and take our jobs. I do believe that it's going to be great for really task driven stuff like, hey, you need to change your flight real quick. Sure, we can do this with generative AI. Here's your chatbot, super easy, get it done. But again, that was a great example. Or what if you need an emergency flight for a funeral, right? You have to talk to someone from the airline to get that done and to get what you need and even to explain your situation. How awful and damaging for the airline's reputation if in a situation like that they keep pushing you through an AI chatbot. So yeah, I think not only is AI something we should not be afraid of, it's something that we should embrace and learn to use, knowing that the essence of human and the skills that we carry, including how much we can control AI moving forward, I think that's going to matter the most. And that's what's going to carry through.
Yeah. When I'm mad, I want the system to know I'm mad. And when AI can't just say I'm sorry because they're not sorry. They're just somebody told them to say they were sorry to everybody. So I want
You do. And
yeah.
here's why, all right, this bleeds into the corporate culture thing a little bit, but let's again think from a business perspective about this airline. Now, even if you had an awful experience with all the prompts, this led you in the wrong direction. I want to talk to a person, right? This is ridiculous. They're at risk of losing you as a
That was
customer.
that was a good
Did that sound
representation.
like
That
you
was
at
close.
1 a.m. when yeah,
Yeah.
good. Really glad. But in all seriousness, they're already at risk of losing you because you already may have decided this is bonkers. I'm never flying this airline again. Now, from a business perspective, had someone gotten on the phone and listened to you and said, you're right, Dave, this was not a great way for us to handle you. This is not the level of customer service that we want to provide. I understand your situation while you're on the road. Let me work on fixing that with you. Can I put you on hold for 5 minutes? Okay, how much better do you already feel? Now, you still may decide I'm not doing that again, but I would actually guess that you're more than likely going to say that was a bad experience. I'm skeptical.
Words.
Words matter. But I'll try flying them again.
Yeah, and I'd probably talk about it in a positive way then, right? It'd probably be more of a then I would actually drop the name of the airline versus, saying it rhymed with Schmunited. I
Right,
would actually say
right.
it, right?
So, I mean, even from a business perspective, a corporate perspective, yeah, the human touch really matters, and it's proven to lead to more revenue, to keep people employed. I mean, this is becoming real science.
What about in the same context? Now you've talked about like reading the room, right? It's kind of what we're talking about in a one-on-one conversation, but something
Yeah.
that maybe technology can't do. And if you're out there trying to sell something, for example, and you're doing a pitch and you've got maybe a room of potential clients or end users, there could be 3 or 4 people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering from you how much goes into really understanding like who is the decision maker in the room or who's the person that's actually engaged with me that I need to actually pitch it to? Or does this person need to hear this and that person hears that? How much of that applies to what you're doing?
So much. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head in a few different areas. Number one, something that I teach in my negotiation workshops is that your negotiation starts long before you have a contract and numbers on paper, and it starts with preparation. Who are the decision makers? How many people are going to be involved? And typically, I'm talking about this from a corporate context and running deals, but you're absolutely right. You need to walk into the room already having a bit of an understanding. So, okay, what kind of event am I walking into? What kinds of people are in this room? Is there anyone I'm trying to target here? What's going to be interesting to other people? What are the questions that I should be asking? So, yes, I think preparation is key. But you hit on something else really interesting, and I'm so glad you did because this matters to me a lot. And when I'm talking to other professionals who are trying to transition their careers and they ask, how have you had 3 successful careers? That's insane. What's going on? One of the skills that I've carried through, let's take it a layer deeper than communication. It's the ability to change your communication based on who you're communicating with. Let me give you an example from my time as a news anchor. I had an opportunity once to do a fantastic story on Montana's prison systems and recidivism rates. So cool. I got to speak to so many people, including inmates. Now, when I'm sitting in this private room with an officer in the back, and I'm sitting across from an inmate who reads and writes at maybe a second or third grade level, do you think that I had to maybe change the way I was asking questions, even my body language, in order to get the best interview? Yes, of course. The way that I sat with and built some quick rapport and interviewed the inmate was wildly different from the way I interviewed the law enforcement officer, which was wildly different from the way I interviewed the governor. To be able to walk into any room, walk into any negotiation, even walk onto a stage as a professional speaker and quickly be able to read, okay, who's my audience? How do I tailor this to them? Because this is about them more than it's about me. And it's actually going to benefit me in the long run. I'm going to elicit the right information. I'm going to get the response I want. It is more strategic for me to be able to shift my communication as I go for you. So thank you for bringing that up, because my gosh, that's something I love talking about. It has been so effective for me. And I think it's something that everyone needs to understand, be aware of, and work to improve. It helps you in your personal relationships. It helps you in your business relationships, your career. I mean, there is no area of life that that concept doesn't touch.
That's very well said. It's probably the core of what makes an effective investigative interviewer is being adaptable, right? I mean,
Yes, you do the same thing.
yeah, I mean, and people that struggle with it are not as successful, right? Because they're trying to
I
enter with a
bet.
script with they're more focused on maybe their intended message versus the way that it's received.
Yeah.
When you were talking about your experience as an anchor, it kind of relates to that's why I love this podcast concept, and I'll get back to that in a second. But the in the last week, I had the chance to spend time with people who've been exonerated, who were wrongfully convicted and served maybe decades
Amazing.
incarcerated or even on death row, right? And so I'm talking to
Yeah.
them about the criminal justice system and reform. So you can imagine how some of them may feel about the
That's a
system.
very sensitive, passionate topic to be discussing.
Sure.
That needs to be approached with care.
But in a week from now, and there's a lot of them listening, I might sit down with a team of 30 detectives or investigators and talk to them about the criminal justice system.
Right.
And what's important to me is that we still have the same values and consistent intent in both messages. We're not changing right who we are,
Right.
but the way it's delivered has to be different based on what the audience is feeling or going through at that moment. And that I
Yeah.
feel that all the time. And when I was going back to the podcast thing, what's interesting is we can't control the audience, right?
Right.
Whoever's listening right now, you might fit into 15 different verticals of
Yeah.
examples. And so we have to be kind of core to what our values are and what our message is and
Absolutely.
wonder who it's for. So it's just interesting.
It's super interesting. And I think it's funny you say that, because I've actually had that question before, especially when it comes to negotiation work. I've had some people who feel really hesitant. And part of their hesitation is, well, isn't this manipulative? It can be if you're approaching it that way. But let me frame it this way. Is it manipulative if, when you're talking to a toddler, your approach is, hey, we're not going to chat philosophy, we're going to chat about toys, and that's how I'm going to build rapport, and that's how I'm going to connect with this toddler? Is that manipulative, or is that actually very wise? And is that just changing your communication to fit the needs of this person? Am I a different Heather because I'm connecting with Dave on the podcast and then a toddler and her toys? No, I'm true to who I am. I just think there's a way to do this. And like you said, there's a way to shift without shifting values. There's a way to translate without altering these core pieces of the connection in the conversation. I think that's a really great point.
Yeah, people should be, especially in the business world, should be used to that, like situational leadership. You're gonna
Yeah. You
manage
have
different
to.
people differently. And, you bring up toddlers. I got two nephews. Each of them have different
Right.
strengths or pressure points of how they need to be communicated to or with to get the same result. So
Yep.
I think that's consistent.
Yeah.
What the second of the three kind of categories that you focus on, and this one is it's interesting because it's ask the question, right? Which is like
Yes.
this is
Which
what
we've already started
yeah, that's what I
doing
think.
and
It's like
touching
what
on.
you speak a lot about. Just ask the question. The worst you can get is a no, right? You don't know what you don't know and what information you can't find out. And I think as part of this, what you can obviously speak to much better than I can, but you do a lot of work to help be an ally for other women in the workplace
Yeah.
too, in the corporate world,
Yeah.
and talking about salary negotiations and having a
Yep.
voice and all these kind of things. But you just don't know what you don't know if you don't ask the question. And
Right.
I think I told you the other day, maybe we just like go to Starbucks and ask for a discount and see what happens. 'Cause you don't know.
What are you afraid of? You get
Right.
a no?
Yeah,
Why is that so
exactly.
scary?
So
Yeah.
where did that come where did that concept, I guess, come from for you? Like how is that a whole series or package of curriculum about asking the question?
Yeah, this really developed from two areas of my life. Number one, this is another skill set that I've been able to take career to career. Obviously, as a news anchor and an interviewer, as a chaplain, I am asking people questions, even faith questions. These are big conversations. My entire career in corporate is, yeah, figuring out who I'm talking to, asking questions, doing discovery, making sure that the deal makes sense. So, question asking is part of what I've done in every career. It's also part of who I am. I'm naturally a very curious person. And if you're not, that doesn't mean you can't improve upon this skill. But I think that because I was totally the kid. Why? Why? Why are we doing this? Why did you say that? Right? If you are naturally curious, I think, again, it just makes you more aware of how that can and should be used. The other area where this really started becoming focused for me is you're exactly right. I have a real heart and sensitivity for the underdog because I've been in that situation. And I was actually in a situation where I knew that I was underpaid. I hadn't been brave enough up to that point to just ask questions around the organization, partly because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to, partly because I was still building up the courage. But I finally did. And I started asking other people on my team about their salaries. And because I had already built relationships, the rapport was already there, right? I didn't go in guns blazing. Hey, what kind of money are you making?
Right.
I wouldn't suggest that. But after building relationship and having trustworthy back and forth conversations, I finally asked a few of my male coworkers, hey, just out of curiosity, what's your pay package look like? Here's mine. You have to be willing to answer it if you're going to ask it,
Right.
right? So that's a good golden rule of asking the questions. But I discovered by asking that specific question about our salaries that I was being paid between $40,000 less than my male coworkers. At a company I had worked for 2.5 years, hitting 150% of quota. That was devastating to me. And it confirmed things that I had already suspected, but it also confirmed that we all need to be better at asking tough questions. Because once I got through that, it wasn't so scary. In fact, it gave me all of the information and ammunition I needed to go to my bosses and say, hey, I know what's going on. I'm not going to name names, but I know what's going on. What are we going to do about this? Or am I leaving? Or what are my options here? If you don't have the information, you can't make good decisions. So, yeah, bringing that full circle, get over the fear of asking the questions. You don't know what you don't know. But when you do ask and you do know, my gosh, doors open for you. Possibilities are endless, but you need to ask the questions to get there. So
It,
yeah, kind of a sad way for me to figure that one out, but that's the reality.
but I mean, it's uh, an unfortunate battle you felt to get to where you had to go to
Yeah.
get that information,
Yeah.
but now you are impacting all these people to not be in that situation,
Yeah.
or proactively get away from it. Like I know one of your kind of tips was talking about in a salary negotiation, companies expect you to negotiate, right? I mean, when you're offering something, they're already having a conversation before the offer of, well, she's probably going to come back with this.
Absolutely.
So
And
don't be
so
afraid.
many, don't be afraid. I think, yeah, let's talk specifically about salary negotiation for a second, because I think there are people listening to this who might be asking themselves those questions, who might be curious about this. And this is certainly a topic that I get a lot of DMs about and a lot of, one-on-one questions about, because so many people are struggling and the economy is tough. How do we get the raise we deserve? And am I underpaid too, like Heather was? These are important things.
That's what's kind of crazy, right? When you make a job offer, anybody makes a job offer, the company before they make that offer is probably having a conversation thinking, all right, we're going to offer Heather
Yes.
something, but
Yep.
we know she's going to come back. How are we going to handle that? So they're already prepared, expecting you to negotiate. And so when the candidate just says, yes, you're really shortcutting yourself.
Absolutely. I don't know what the statistic is now based on 2024, but I read that I think for millennials specifically, it's close to 50% that have never even attempted to negotiate. Yet, again, I don't remember the exact statistic. It's like 70 something percent of companies expect you to. So you're absolutely right. There's a conversation, whether it's through HR or the hiring manager or both, long before your interview process ends and you have an offer in front of you. But so many people are either afraid, and I get it, I was there before too, but they're either afraid to ask for more because they think it's going to make them look bad or greedy or be manipulative, or they just don't understand that they can ask for more. And part of the reason I know this is true is because I've been on the other side of it. I have interviewed people for open roles. Even more so, though, I have worked and negotiated very large business deals. You'd better believe that I'm not putting our best numbers in front of them right out the gate, because I am expecting that you're going to come back and say, well, we love the product and we need this cybersecurity strategy, but we don't know if it's that valuable. Great. Let's keep this conversation going.
Right.
I already knew that was coming. I
Right.
didn't give you my best and final. So if that's true in that corporate situation, why wouldn't it be true in a job offer situation? So yes, when I'm getting DMs and I've even done one-on-one coaching specific to salary negotiations, of course this is not what large corporations want us to know, because they're not gonna lead with the best job offer.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, walk away from this podcast episode knowing that negotiate every single job offer. It can be salary, it can be equity, it can be benefits. There's a way to do this that, again, doesn't feel slimy, is extremely professional, that shows your value. The negotiation starts long before the numbers are on the table, but that can also get you a little bit farther, right? Not pie in the sky numbers, but yeah, you can almost always get a little bit more.
The only time you won't get more is if you don't ask, is what I'm gathering from you.
Yes.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Well, I think the same. So the same concept of asking the question when in your prior career, I'm picturing you in your investigative journalism and anchor role, and you're talking to guests or however, whatever
Yeah.
your task was. How much of that, I guess, is our questions being prescribed to you, and here's what you need to ask and how you need to ask it, or how much liberty were you given, or maybe that whole context of that you can just describe a
Yeah.
little bit better.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it, because the answer is it was both. I think that certainly when it comes to just, hey, we've got a 5, 6, and 10 o'clock broadcast, and we need these specific stories because these things happened today, you're obviously going to get the who, what, when, where, why. So those are kind of the prescribed, like, yes, we do. Every single interview, for example, we have to start on camera, probably similar to you with this podcast, but just, hey, not only is this a mic check, but we also want you to get comfortable in front of the camera. Can you say and spell your name?
Right.
What is your title? We would start with something like that. So, yes, there were some prescribed and required questions, but the best journalists, and I would say in your field too, the best investigators, the best interviewers, of course they take some liberties, because if you're not able to hear a response and quickly figure out the underlying story, you're kind of not doing your job. I have such a fun example of this from those news anchor days. I was doing another really cool story on gun laws and restrictions, and I was outside of a gun shop, and there was this kind of grungy looking guy like outside of the gun shop, and we just needed, someone who didn't work there. Just man on the street interview is what we call that. We just needed a man on the street to talk to us as a citizen about, what he thinks of gun laws and potential changes. And so I asked him pretty basic question along those lines. Hey, what do you think about these laws? And his response was, I kid you not, well, I can't buy guns because I'm a felon, but I could get them if I wanted to. What do you think happened next?
You ran.
Well, luckily I had a videographer with me,
Right.
so it wasn't too scary, but great, there we go. This was not a thumbs up situation.
Yeah.
You better believe I asked more questions.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, what do you mean you could get more guns and ammo if you wanted to? Where do you get the? And he didn't give me all of those answers. He caught on pretty quick, and he probably shouldn't have said that, but that was the story. Can you imagine if I had stopped the question there? So
Most people do. That's like when you say that,
yeah,
it's triggering me to, in an investigation, right? People, their whole goal is to get as much information as possible, but
yeah,
sometimes we get so focused on what's that singular answer that you
right.
miss these passive comments that trigger like, oh, more people are involved, or there's some other location I need to
Yes,
go look into. And so I think that's a
yes.
perfect example, and I'm glad you made it out of the situation.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
am too.
yeah.
It's now one of my favorite stories to tell because it was just so wild, but those are the real things that I was dealing with every day. And it led me to this keynote, which, ask the questions. Are we asking the right questions? But I also talk a lot about strategic questioning, which I know, Dave, is something that you talk about, strategic communication. But there absolutely is a way for us to guide people into better responses, better stories, get additional information, find underlying reasons and themes. If we know where we want the conversation to go, again, I don't think this is manipulative at all if it's used well. It's having a vision and it's having the ability to bring people with you into that vision. And that's how I really approached my time interviewing as a news anchor, but I've carried that again into other careers, corporate and business and cybersecurity. I do that all day long. I'm trying to paint a picture of here's the cybersecurity gap we're trying to fill. I'm going to ask you all of the questions that are going to get you to see that gap, right? So that's strategic questioning, is asking questions intentionally, doing it in a way that guides people where you want them to go, and being able to, on the fly, which is where I think the skill comes in and needs to be practiced, but on the fly, ask additional questions based on what you're getting.
Based on, according to you, which I've learned, 90% listening, right? And
Oh,
people don't
yeah.
do that very well. And listening is not just listening. We just had an episode with one of my favorite guests, Matt Halloran. The episode was titled "Shut the F Up and Listen," and his
Yes.
his whole concept was engage listening. And kind of the example you just gave with your man on the street, I think about the if you were actually trying to get some juice out of this story,
Right.
right?
Right.
You talked about this earlier, kind of knowing your audience and knowing the message, what it means to him. So if he says this to you, but I have a lot of other ways to get guns and ammo or whatever. If you start, because now some people are like excited, hey, this is interesting information. And if you just start to fire questions away, well, where do you get them from? How does that happen? Now that person knows that is your target, which means they have resistance to give you details there.
He
If you
feels like
can,
he's being interrogated and he's in the hot
absolutely.
seat and he made a mistake and he shouldn't have said that. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you can be adaptable and understand the situation, like you're on the street, it's public, there's a camera there, so now there's an extra heightened sense of nervousness. But if you can normalize that behavior and say, you know what, we've heard that from like three people today, and before you ask the follow-up question, or hey, I can, hey,
Or you
that's
bounce between questions. Okay,
right,
well, what kind of ammo do you use? That's a pretty benign, great. Now let's go back to, what do you mean black market? Is there
right.
a black market in this community for guns? So that's another tactic that I think
That's a
works.
good example because, and that's the other thing, even by asking. kind of an assumptive question in some way. What kind of ammo that you use? You're suggesting he uses ammo. Now, the details that you get there is going to provide you from an investigative standpoint. He's already now committed to something that you can ask further questions about. But all that comes, I mean, to me, from all the lessons you're giving here is asking the right question, then giving that person space to actually answer it
Yes.
is really important.
This podcast is a little hard for me because I'm usually the one asking questions, right? And you hit the nail on the head. Being able to listen is way more than half of the battle because yeah, if you're not actually listening, and that doesn't mean getting ready for your next response. That doesn't even mean assuming what you're going to hear or what you want to hear. It's genuinely, okay, I asked the question. Here's the space. What's going to happen? I find it exciting, which is probably part of the reason I've honed in on it, and same with you. But yeah, in any context, personal, professional, all of these industries, it's not just what you say, it's when you say it. And so in negotiations, silence is a superpower. In relationships, even personal relationships, you better know when to shut the F up and give your partner room to vent, to speak, to dream. It's important in every single context. And that also is a skill that you can improve upon. These don't all have to be deeply innate things that you've got 100% figured out. Now you're more aware. You need to do a better job of listening. It's going to give you the information you want. It's going to lead to your success in the long run. Do
Yeah,
it.
that's perfect. Yeah, the to wrap that section up for me is I going back to a time when I was in the field doing more investigations, and people would call me after their interview and they would say, the person told me this, 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 and this. And I would ask, well, what about X? And they said, oh, they didn't say anything about that. And my follow-up was, well, did you ask?
Why not?
Yeah, and to me, everything you just said, it's more like a friend calls you and says, "Hey, I just got this job offer," and you say, "Well, what did you get for PTO?" I don't know. Well, did you ask for more? It's like, did you ask? If you didn't ask, it's on you that that information wasn't provided, and that's my wrap up from
Yes.
all that information. Just gets my takeaway.
I love that takeaway. It's kind of another iteration of how are you
Right.
compared to how is blank,
Yeah.
right? It's taking it a step further and going a layer deeper. And yeah, that matters.
I think so. What you just said, like get it going a layer deeper, takes the first two things. So, we talked about soft skills. We talked about asking the right question.
Yeah.
I think those things fuel the third part of this conversation about just corporate culture or culture altogether. Because
Yeah.
if you can't communicate and if you can't listen and ask the right questions, you're not getting into that layered levels of
Yeah,
what's really going on in an environment. So I know that's another area that you spend some time on.
I
Is that
do.
personal experience? Is that just a passion you have, or it just kind of meshed together? Where did that come from?
They mesh together. Absolutely. A lot of personal experience because I've been in corporate America for 12 years. And even now, I work with businesses, organizations, teams, leaders. And so I'm very familiar with this world. Again, the work I've done has ranged from engineers and software developers to bigwig executives. And so I know that language, I know that conversation, and I've seen where it's gone wrong. I've experienced it myself. Even the story that I told you earlier about discovering my own salary discrepancy, there's a culture issue in that. So, this also lends to my passion for fighting for the underdog in corporate and in life. But I just think that we can no longer ignore that corporate America, and probably not just America, right? But corporate needs a revamp. We are seeing, especially younger generations, they're becoming more and more loud about their quiet quitting. Let's just use that as the example. Quiet quitting is real. There are statistics and science now behind this, and the cost that quiet quitting, the revenue loss, the trickle effect of that kind of loss worldwide, there are estimates that worldwide companies are losing like $1.5 trillion based on this quiet quitting concept. Now, how scientific is that? I'm not sure yet, but just go and Google corporate culture statistics 2024, 2025. You'll be amazed at the stuff that's popping up from Harvard, I mean, like real research around this stuff. We know that revenue production increases by 300 to 400% when teams identify that they are strong cultures with purpose, compared to those that say, this is toxic, weak culture, and I don't know what I'm doing here. So I just find it so interesting that the things that we have been sensing in corporate for a long time are turning into real science. And I don't think that should be ignored, which is why I want to talk about it more. And so, yeah, the angle that I take when I'm talking through that in a workshop or on a stage is more so from a, hey, you realize this is science now, right? Perspective. Because it's very hard to just go knock on executive doors and say what people have been saying for years. Hey, end discrimination, end toxic workplace culture. Yeah, easier said than done. So where is the problem really? Can we identify that? And if we can, how do we change it? I just think this is such an important conversation now, and especially moving forward. The organizations that are going to thrive, that are going to even be financially successful for years and years to come, are the organizations that are understanding, if we don't take a human-centric approach. Wow, how did we bring that back around to the beginning of this podcast? Forget AI. Of course, it's going to be part of our workplace culture. But if we don't take a human-centric approach, we're not going to do very well. And we're now seeing that evidence out loud. So how can we ignore that? I just think it's a critical conversation.
So if I'm a leader that's listening out there, and a leader doesn't mean by title, it just means there's people that I have influence over in some
Yes.
capacity. What is step one for me to either identify my culture in the workplace or try to address issues that exist?
I'd say that step one is, it goes right back to listening and watching and observing. If you aren't aware of where the problems are, how are you going to continue to influence? If you are in leadership positions, even asking the right questions, again, of your team members, right? Building relationship so that you understand when they're a flight risk for your company, and not just when it's happening, but why. If we don't figure out the why to these things, we're never going to get anywhere. So whether you're a lay leader or a formal leader with a specific title, I think you start with observation. You ask your people good questions. You have to be willing to take feedback, right? You think we have a micromanaging culture? That stings, but can you give me examples? Okay, I'm not going to be offended by that. Being willing to take feedback is really important. Implementing the change is harder. I think that right now we're at a point in our culture where we're seeing a lot of corporate change agents. And I consider myself to be one. I am a change agent. And we have a lot more of those popping up and kind of blowing the whistle and raising the flags and helping to identify where some things need to change. But it's going to take time. Right? It's going to take a lot of time to truly shift corporate culture. I think that we will get there because I think people are just not tolerating bad leadership anymore. But yeah, we still got some work to do. And I think every individual leader, lay or formal in an organization, can be part of that fight and part of that change.
So because when you say culture, I know there's different generations of leaders listening
Yes.
to this call.
Yeah.
So, or to this podcast. So when we talk about culture and toxicity, some people think, well, we got to pay people more and give them pizza on Fridays. And that's not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're talking
What
about.
are some of these intangibles that you feel like have helped improve company culture that are not directly related to salary?
Yeah. I think, first of all, leaders of every generation, but especially, let's say, some of the more experienced generations who are in top leadership positions right now, first and foremost, they need to understand and completely buy into the idea that you can be profitable without sacrificing your people. People and profit. You don't have to choose one or the other. Until we have those leaders buying into that idea, it's going to be really hard to implement anything, even the intangibles. But to answer your question more specifically, I think you're right. Some of this is not necessarily salary related. there are a lot of people, more statistics, who would take slightly less salary to feel safe and secure and valued in their workplace. I'd say a lot of people, I'd say most people who do not care if you give them the cool water bottle with your company logo and a pizza party on Friday. They care about whether or not they're going to be penalized for taking time off of work because their dog just died. So I think that those intangibles can change organization to organization. One that I've seen that I really liked, I know a company who shuts down on the first Friday of every month. They say everybody gets a 3-day weekend. We're going to do that once a month. So even if you never take a day of your PTO, you're going to have 12 days off a year. And we all acknowledge that nothing's going to crash and burn in the 24 hours, really 8 business hours that we close our doors, so that people can have a 3-day weekend and live their personal lives or take a little, staycation, and people come back refreshed. So that particular organization has seen great success. I wouldn't say that's intangible, but that's a great benefit that is implementing real change. So I think you can get creative.
Yeah. Well, speaking of creative, and the last thing I have on corporate culture, remote work. And
Yeah.
it's so much different, right? You're losing some of that, the social interaction and maybe the rapport building, and people are kind of checked out and maybe isolated. Some people thrive in that, some people don't. But have you seen any organizations or offer any advice on how to increase a more positive, inclusive culture remotely?
Yeah. First, I will say I am a fan and advocate of remote work. I think that as we go farther and farther into the future, there are very few roles, not all of them, but very few roles that can't be at least a hybrid work type situation. So I think we just need to get on board with that. If if a company can't, then offer a stipend for gas. Make sure that there's really good parking. Like, make this make sense. Otherwise, again, younger generations especially, they're just not going to tolerate that. We're seeing that happening. When it comes to remote culture, you're not wrong. It's harder to connect, but people really are so connected these days through all of their devices that I don't know, maybe it's not as hard as we think to build a little group outside of work, an ERG group that meets once a month, or you get together with local colleagues. I've worked for really every organization I've worked for has been spread across the country and globe. That doesn't mean that I can't find the people who are in the Denver metro area and get together for a drink now and then. So that can help. One-on-ones. If you are a leader, make sure that you're having one-on-ones with all of your people. And here's one that can help improve corporate culture. If your one-on-one is just a list of business items and here's my agenda and did you do this? What was the result on that? We all understand that business needs to get done, but that is maybe your only time, especially working remote, to connect with your employee. Is that really the impression you want to leave them with? Ask them some better questions. Hey, how is your spouse? Hey, how is that side passion project going? Like, the rapport building, every industry.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question, because I think that can go in a lot of different directions, but certainly it continues to come back to human connection and
Yeah.
connecting well, and that helps us with this weirdly remote thing that's not going away.
I think, well, it does help. It's a good answer because I think being intentional about it is what you're calling,
Intentionality.
yeah. If we're in a building together, I could walk past your office, pop in and say hi and chat for 10 minutes. We're
Right.
not. So I have to intentionally schedule a one-to-one or call you or reach out
Yeah.
to you to make sure that that conversation happens.
Right.
Those three categories, I recommend if you're listening, connect with Heather on LinkedIn, everywhere you can find her, but LinkedIn is a good way to connect and kind of
Yeah.
stay informed on these topics and all the different suggestions and lessons and things you can do for their company. Before I let you go and let you wrap up with everybody, I know, in the last little while of your career now, you're doing public speaking.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about all about these great communication tips, but are any lessons learned in the last couple of years of getting on a stage thinking like, I'm a communication expert. Wait a second, this is different or new to me. Any
Oh,
obstacles you've overcome?
oh, heck yes. I mean, anyone who has entered the public speaking arena, yourself included, Dave, I've seen
Mhm.
some of your stuff. You know, there's no such thing as perfect. I've stumbled on words today in this episode. Like, there's no such thing as perfect. Don't get hung up on it, right? People aren't paying as much attention to you, even if you're on a stage, as they are your message, right? They're not going to walk away and remember what color shirt I'm wearing today, but they might remember I should always try to negotiate my job offers. So once I realized that, it helped a lot. But I also think that, you know, jokes aside, being able to understand when to speak, what to say, and how to do it well does not mean that you're never going to stumble over a word. It doesn't mean that your grammar has to be perfect. It means that you're able to adjust. It means that you're human. And that connects more with an audience on stage than me delivering the most perfect keynote I've ever given. In fact, some of the best keynotes I've seen others do is when they have a technical fumble or they lose their place and they're just super human about it. So the more intentional I am about remembering that my message is for them, not for me, and I can show a little bit of what I've learned, but the goal here is to connect. The goal here is I want you to feel something that I have felt, and I want you to understand why it's important, and I want you to be able to apply it to your life the same way I have. The more I've been able to get into that mindset, the better results I have on stage and the better feedback I get, right? This episode hasn't been perfect, but my gosh, we've had
What are
fun
you
and it's been
talking
lively.
about?
I know.
This episode hasn't been perfect.
Well, every episode that
There
Dave
goes our
puts out is
five-star rating
perfect.
for everybody listening. You're right, though. When you said the tech issues, one of my most memorable keynotes I've ever given, and it was probably not great, but my laptop was plugged into the podium. The podium was not plugged into anything. So the battery
Perfect.
died
Yeah.
and no presentation. And I just went with it. But it was one of those, it was probably the first time I realized like PowerPoint shouldn't be your crutch. You don't need some other,
Right.
just be you and deliver the message. And it was terrifying in the moment, but afterwards now is one of my favorite examples of
Yeah.
just be a speaker. Just do your thing. Just give a
Just do
message.
it.
Yeah.
And some are home runs and some are not. You continue to improve. You watch yourself on camera and you get better as you go. But if you're not enjoying it, then yeah, maybe don't try it.
Right. Well, I'm going to make sure. So if you're listening and you're driving, so hopefully you're not clicking or looking at anything right now,
Please
but
don't.
or on the
Be
treadmill,
safe.
that's also dangerous. But in these show notes, we'll make sure to link Heather's LinkedIn profile, website, plenty of ways to connect, a lot of really good content out there, and you can bring her into your organization or just reach out to her directly. But before I just sign off, I'm going to let you sign us off. Any kind of last truth, takeaway message you want to make sure people are leaving with?
There are so many ways I could respond to that. And this conversation has been awesome. It really went in a lot of different directions. I think the message that keeps popping up for me is yeah, being human is your competitive edge. Connecting with other humans, making the mistakes, showing them off, even. My gosh, like those are the people you like. Those are the people you want to talk to and be around. Those are the people you want to do business with. Those are the people you trust. So, being as human as possible and doing it with integrity, I think leads to success in every arena. And that's it.
That's perfect. I'm not even going to add to that or say anything because that's a perfect message. I love that.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining. Thank you all for
Thank
listening.
you.
Make sure to find and connect with Heather afterwards. And thank you for joining us on this episode of Truth Be Told.
Thanks for having me.
To help more listeners find our show, please provide us a rating, give us a follow, and share this episode with your colleagues. For the latest news and to engage with our guests, follow Truth Be Told on your favorite social media apps. And don't forget, we are available on all major platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and watch a video of this episode on YouTube. On behalf of our guests and valued sponsors, thanks again for listening to this episode of Truth Be Told.